Okay, this is going to be an odd review when you consider that this is only the frame of an XD, and I'm doing a trigger review. But I think it's worth doing now rather than waiting till I have my slide back from doing some RMR cuts and some other things, to go ahead and talk about the trigger that Woody at Freedomsmith sent me. He had sent me this flat face trigger when he first started making them, and I specifically request one that wasn't anodized because I like that raw aluminum look. And I have a Powder River Precision Ultimate Match trigger in this XD, and this worked really well with that Powder River kit. I like the fact that the trigger safety is aluminum. The spring's not too hard, not too soft. It's not super noticeable that when you're depressing the spring on this flat face trigger. It was really easy to file this down to get exactly where I wanted in terms of the trigger safety catching against the frame, right in the exact place that I would like it to. And like I said, I considered this a marked improvement over the trigger shoe or trigger boot of the Powder River Precision, which also had an over travel stop built into it too, which this does. And that was fairly easy to file. I actually just filed it on the gun with a Swiss Army knife, a file. So it was really easy without having to take it on and off, just to file that down pretty quickly. And he just today sent me one of his Fat Daddy triggers, which first of all looks awesome in the gun. And I want to talk about a couple of things that I think he's really... one thing in particular where he's really onto something, even compared to the flat face trigger. My only criticism, if you want to call it that, of the flat face trigger was where on the trigger that you really need to engage the safety. If you see, it's really far down the trigger, which is where you should be depressing the trigger. You should be engaging it as far down as possible for the most dexterity. Dexterity translates into precision, so the more precision I can have in terms of movement, if I need to take a really long distance shot, slow, steady, smooth, depress, and breaking that sear and everything as controlled as possible, then I want to be down there anyway. But in a self-defense situation where time is of the essence and you're reaching and drawing and shooting as fast as you can, point shooting inside 10 feet, your finger's just going to fall wherever it's going to fall. And I never had a problem with this, not my finger falling on this, either shooting, sub 0.75 from a holster, shots on a shot clock with 0.15 splits. Never had a problem shooting at that pace with this trigger, but I was concerned that it could be possible for some people that they not be far enough down to really get leverage on that trigger safety to move that out of the way. In fact, I overfiled that just a little bit to make sure that never happened to me. It would still catch, but just the slightest depression of that trigger safety, and it would get out of the way. Moving on to the Fat Daddy that he just sent me. First off, there's not a specific over travel limiter there. What's really limiting the over travel, if you want to consider that, is the back of the trigger itself. Okay, so there's not an over travel stop like this has in the back that's integrated to the bottom of the trigger boot. But it really isn't that noticeable in terms of over travel compared to the original trigger. I feel like this sticks out far enough in the back that it's almost integrated into the back of that trigger because it protrudes back so far. I don't feel like there's all that much more travel in terms of over travel here than there was with the flat face trigger. What I really think he hit the ball out of the park with this time is exactly where that trigger safety falls on the finger. If I get all the way down, I'm literally riding my finger down the top of the trigger guard, and it still depresses that trigger safety, and I can get the trigger to pull all the way rearward. If I move as far forward or up on the trigger as possible, I'm still, if I can get it in my hand right, I'm literally making contact with the frame as high as I can here. This is really where the contact is. As high as I could get my finger in there in a full grip, I'm still depressing that. You would have a hard time putting your finger anywhere on this trigger in a way that didn't allow you to pull it. So, and the way that he designed the trigger safety itself, instead of it, like I said, being way down at the bottom and this long sort of fulcrum type motion there, it's right there in the middle, and you just like it's just butter. I don't even really tell that I can't really tell it's there when I put my finger on the trigger. I do think this has more over travel than this trigger does. That may or may not be important to you. It's not important enough to me in terms of what I'm feeling to make a difference. If you look at that, like there's a fair amount of space there, and it could just be in my mind that there's more over travel. There may not be. Look how much space is between the back of that trigger and the frame. I mean, this is making contact up here so far back. It probably isn't. If there's any difference in over travel, we're talking about this much. It would be negligible in any defensive or even competitive situation. Great trigger. And whether you're putting it on a stock XT in terms of trigger or Mod 2 or XDS, whatever you're going to run this on, XDM. I know he's got versions for just about everything I think now that XD makes. All the various platforms. I think you will be thrilled with it. And here's my thing, and I said this if you've watched my review of the full review of the flat face when he sent me that one. Spreading that weight out, the pounds per square inch, across your finger on that flat face, that wide face trigger, which this one, I mean, it couldn't get any wider. It fills that entire void. It really spreads that weight out. So this is the ultimate match trigger. It pulls on a trigger scale of about 2.5 pounds. So it's a light trigger, but spreading that pressure across your entire pad of your finger even makes it feel lighter, without it being any lighter actually, in terms of now you've got this hair trigger with like this much movement, like you see some of these glass rod 1911s, which I wouldn't carry in a defensive capacity, and I feel completely comfortable carrying with this one. Now your mileage may vary. I wouldn't recommend everybody just go out there and carry a gun for defensive or offensive use, a duty weapon, if you will, with a 2.5 pound trigger in it. Okay, but your finger straighten off the trigger. It doesn't matter if it's a 1 pound trigger or a 50 million pound trigger. You're not going to pull it. But that's not what this is about. This is about this trigger, and the Fat Daddy trigger should come in the XD. Every XD is writing a letter to Santa Claus, hoping and praying that this is what it gets in its stocking. Well worth the money. You can tell just by looking at it in your hand that this is not something that he's just pumping out haphazardly on a CNC machine. Like, there's been a great deal of effort in coding that program to get all the different bevels and everything perfect, rounded where it needs to be round, square when it needs to be square. And Woody's done a great job with this trigger, and I was shocked, honestly, which is why I couldn't wait to do this review till I had a slide to actually run it on the range. I was shocked. I loved this trigger so much. I really didn't think it could be better. But what he's done with that trigger safety and how he's integrated the over travel into the trigger itself without things that can be, this could, what's the odds? Slim to none, but this could catch on something, cordage and stuff like that, and slip in there and gets caught and hung up on stuff, fray something. Not that big of a deal. It's not a safety concern, but it is one more thing to something to call on. This is such a clean look. It like I said, it's what every XD wants to have. So, super thrilled with it. Can't believe I like it better than the other one. Get one.